Welcome back, everyone. I'm Gabe Arnold, founder and CEO of Business Marketing Engine. And today on my podcast, Today's Business Leaders, I'm really excited to have a good friend of mine, Paul Edwards, on. He's somebody that I consider to be a philosopher and somebody that really thinks about life at a deep level. And so we've connected on that front in many conversations. On top of that, he's a successful entrepreneur that has learned a lot over the years. And so I'm really excited to hear his story. So stay tuned, and we're going to have a wonderful conversation. So welcome to the show, Paul. I've been looking forward to this all week. So thanks for being here.
It's a privilege. Thanks so much for having me, my friend. It's so good to see you again. And I have a question. I think you might be able to answer this. I ask it of people I really admire and get along with, and I like to ask, how is your soul?
My soul is really good right now, and I like that question. It's been a great season of contribution, and I feel like after years of trying to figure it out, I feel like I'm in a season where I'm doing the right work and I'm really, really enjoying life. So that's an excellent question. And I always like when people flip around my interviews and interview me. So I appreciate that. Cool.
It's good to occasionally have someone who's curious about you and not just the other way around, I've found.
Yeah, I would agree. And you're somebody that I find to be incredibly intentional. You're a really effective communicator. You show up with the same calm presence and kindness in all spaces that you communicate. And that's something admirable. And just, I have a ton of respect for you. And that's why, one of the reasons why I really looked forward to this. We've been connected for a couple of years now, and I want to dive into your story and learn a little bit more about you, and we'll uncover your brilliance and who you are. Everyone that's listening in, I just highly encourage you to follow Paul, and we'll share some more resources and where you can connect with him. But he's somebody I really respect and admire. And so as we kind of dive into this, Paul, I'm curious, when did you first realize that you're an entrepreneur?
You know how you realize it at bits and pieces before you ever actually do it. And I think even for the first couple of years that I was doing it, it was sort of, I don't want to use the phrase fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
But, objectively, I wasn't making any money. That's always the true test. I think it's actually a really indicative test, and not because of do you have, not in a binary sense, do you have money or don't you? The question is, are you serving your fellow human beings to the point that they value what you do so that they will open up their wallets and say, here, take my money. I need what you offer. Yeah. That's a whole different question. I find that so vastly preferable.
Yeah.
To are you the most popular? Are you the most trendy? Do you have the best, hooks or advertising? I mean, all that's important, but it's secondary. The real question is, are you bringing something valuable that people will pay for?
Yeah.
So I didn't have that, but long before I ever took up the mantle, I understood you can't sit around and wait to be told or offered everything. You've got to go out and provide leadership. So I guess you could say, like, one example of this is when I was growing up in Southern California. This is shortly after Wayne Gretzky had come from the Edmonton Oilers to the Kings.
Mm-hmm.
And I had come from Edmonton to Los Angeles. I'm originally from Edmonton.
Nice.
And roller hockey was taking off. I knew the game backwards and forwards. I could play it. I just didn't. I complained to my dad one time. I said, I don't really have any leagues or anything around here. They got, it's still kind of disorganized. And he said, well, why don't you start up a weekly pickup game with all your buddies from school who are into it?
Yeah.
And I said, I'm 11 years old, right? And I'm like, what do I do? And he said, well, you get on the phone and you call them, and then whoever says they're coming, you pick two teams, you set up two nets, and you go play a game,
Don't overthink it, right?
Right. And I've never, I've never forgotten that lesson because I did, and it started to take off. And then my friends would invite their friends, and we got into a weekly habit, where I just made a bunch of phone calls, picked two teams, and then we would play you can play almost year round in Southern California, right?
Yeah.
Outdoors. So
Yeah.
unless it was raining, we were out there playing, and I've never forgotten that if something needs starting, I know how to just go out there and start pushing buttons, and making stuff work. So bit of a
Yeah.
long answer there, but there you go.
No, that's excellent. That's great advice. I always tell people, look behind you. Is anybody standing behind you? Nope. You're the guy. You're the gal. If you
Yeah.
want this, you got to do it. And that's such an amazing lesson that your dad taught you, because no, I don't think I've ever met a leader who honestly told me, "Oh yeah, I had the whole plan figured out. I knew what we were going to do step by step. I knew exactly when and how we were going to get there." Most
Oh yeah.
people, yeah, most people, are just like, I'm willing to start and take the first step and figure it out as we go. And so that's probably a more accurate description than the phrase that you said, and we all throw around, of like, fake it till you make it. It's actually like, take action until you figure out, the rest of the steps. Like, just, take the first step and move forward. And yeah, that's definitely
Precisely.
a lot of
Yeah.
truth there. Yeah. So at 11, you start to understand how to be a leader with hockey, which is awesome. I'm a huge hockey fan, so that's awesome. And where did that lead you? Like, today, you run your business, you're an entrepreneur, and you're an entrepreneur. What were the steps between 11 and now that kind of led you to where you are?
Well, I think things like that carry forward into what I write about in my book, Influencer Networking Secrets. I wasn't really consciously aware that this was happening at the time. I was just trying to make a living.
Mhm.
So I entered my 30s wanting to get into radio and broadcasting, right? Everybody's like, "Oh, you got the voice, you got other," and I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," but I couldn't make it work,
Yeah.
and I had to get a job. I'm now married. I got two kids and a mortgage and all that kind of stuff, and so I said, I found an opportunity to work in the insurance business, and I'd had no connection to it, didn't know anything about it. Dad wasn't an insurance agent, none of that.
Yeah.
I get into this business, and the first thing I discover is nobody wants to talk about the product that I'm selling.
Yep.
Right? It is about as unsexy as you can get. It's confusing. There's a lot of cynicism about it.
Yeah.
There's a caricature, Groundhog Day, Ned Ryerson, that kind of thing. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, if I can't talk about insurance, what can I talk about? But it wasn't long after that I began to see, oh, there's plenty to talk about.
Mhm.
Because I had read books like Carnegie, the How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Mhm.
And so I said, well, instead of talking, I'm just going to listen to what people are talking about.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try and figure out if I can make the conversation about stuff that they're preoccupied with. And,
Mhm.
amid a group of business owners, it doesn't take long to figure out some of the real basics. I can't get enough customers in my doors. I can't get my message out there. I can't, I can't do this. I can't do that. I don't know how to do this part of business. I need somebody who can refer me this type of client. What it all pointed to for me, Gabe, was that insurance could be the grease for the skids, right?
Yeah.
That would keep me paying the bills and supporting my family. But what
Yep.
I could really do for people was become sort of a hub of connections, introductions, and information.
Hmm.
I had this ability from the leadership principle that I had learned, starting the hockey game,
Yeah.
to not wait until people did things for me. I would just go and do things for them without an expectation of return,
Yeah.
but with a simultaneous knowledge that what goes around comes around, right?
Yeah.
And so I would go and I would teach, I went to a conference full of realtors, a multiple listing sales group that met here. And I got wind of the fact that they were planning to rework the National Flood Insurance Act, and I could immediately make the connection. Well, that's going to torpedo a lot of real estate deals that people have going on. So I did
Yeah.
instead of doing a webinar, a presentation about insurance, I did about the kind of insurance I was selling. I did a presentation about this flood insurance thing is going to change, and it might affect deals you have going on, particularly in the flood zones nearby where we live. So be on your guard. And people like, whoa, that was really helpful. And they started responding to me. And so as long as I stayed focused on what was preeminently on the mind of the people I was interacting with, I didn't have to worry about my phone ringing or my email buzzing saying, can you help me with insurance? Because I recruited what I called my own unpaid sales force.
Yeah.
You know, you hear about quiet quitting. Well, I do quiet hiring. I have people working for me who don't know they're working for me. Right.
That's awesome.
And so I just, you know, I said, you know, I'd sit there in the office working on something for a nonprofit board that I was on, and my phone would ring because I was so busy concentrating on helping each person that I came in contact with get what they wanted, that it had to come back around to bless me on the other end of the circle, regardless of it's not something I could engineer or manipulate, but it was something that happened.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I like how you started out in the beginning, like talking about money is the measurement of value, but it is not the value. You know, it's like it's one of the simplest ways, at least, we can measure value in our current society, right? So it's like I saw something the other day, you know, I get it. I think we've all done these things too. So I'm not, you know, it's not from a place of judgment. I saw somebody the other day post and say, like, what's your biggest cash collected, you know, on a single day? And I started reading the comments because I was curious and interested. And I realized, like, there was no value in the whole conversation going on. It's like, cool, like you collected X thousand, or, you know, some people said they collected 1 million a day. And I'm like, that's awesome. But like, it's money. It's here. It's gone. Like, we should put it to work when we have it. Sometimes it disappears. Like, it's just money. And I was like, and then somebody commented and they said, how about how many people's lives you've impacted in a single day? And it was like, and they got, you know, they basically got made fun of for that. And I was like, oh my God, like, I'm glad I didn't engage in this conversation, because if our focus is just how much can I collect, how much can I take, how much can I, you know, take away from this, then that becomes a super shallow existence. And for any entrepreneur that started a business that said, I'm starting this business so I can become a millionaire, it's such a short run. Like, because there's no fuel, there's no drive, there's no way you're going to make your $1 million and be happy with yourself if you do even make it. Compared to like the people that say, man, I identified this need, just like you talked about, like, oh man, there's this new change with flood insurance. So like, I'm just going to help these people solve it. And of course it all comes back to you. Because if you just contribute, you know, first, then everything works. You know, a great friend and mentor of mine, Brian Kirk, says, you know, contribute to connect. And I was talking to my fiance Rachel about that today. And I was like, we were talking about a different situation. I was like, you know, I think this lesson applies here. Like, if we can help this person understand, like, contribute first and everything else will work out fine, then it's so much easier. But I think maybe this has just been going on. I'm sure in some senses it's been going on for thousands of years. But I feel like, having grown up without the internet, and then we have the internet show up, and then we have this ability for each individual to broadcast their own perception and their own media story, their own news story, that there's this popular culture around entrepreneurship that people think is entrepreneurship, and they think it's showing off how much you collected or how much you made or the nice house or the nice car. And because of that, I feel like there's been a loss in the understanding of, like, value first. If you provide value, you never have to worry about money. If you're always trying to just get money, you'll always worry about money. And it ends up just being like such a shallow existence when we say, oh, I'm just in it for the money, whether or not we're actually verbally articulating that. But in our behavior, people can always tell what we're actually up to in our behavior, right? And you know, I love your example, because I had a client reach out, or a former client, the client who spent a ton of money with over a bunch of years and ended up bringing some stuff in house, and their business has really grown. And I was super happy for them when they said, hey, we're bringing some marketing in house. But they reached out the other day and said, like, hey, my CPA just quit immediately. Like, I'm assuming something happened or whatever. And they're like, I know, you know, great people. And I was able to connect them to my CPA and like help them out. And I love when people reach out like that I've worked with before, or like I coached in the past, or we, you know, we're able to serve and help. And then they, you know, they reach out and they want more help. That's my favorite thing in the world. I always say, thank you so much for reaching out. I love being able to give back and help because I love working with you. And I think there's two sides to it. I think with the incorrect perception of what entrepreneurship is, because there's too much on that, flashy, you got to be successful, you got to work 24/7, like all the noise that we hear there. That's going on. And then for the people that are watching that, I think it creates an unhealthy perception, like, oh, well, I can't reach out to that person, or I don't know how to ask for help. So we shut down both sides. We're not giving value when we follow the popular path. And then we're not even opening the opportunity for people to ask for help and value. And I remember I was listening to Alex Ramosi the other day on his podcast, and he was talking about how he's like, sometimes I've seen like business mentors and coaches and people that have gone before be upset that it was so easy for the next generation to do better. And he's like, that's the whole point of blazing the path and hacking your way through the jungle and learning all the lessons, is so that everybody has it easier after you. And he's like, I want everybody to be massively more successful than me, because then I'll know I've done my job. And so I think there's so much mindset in entrepreneurship. And so I'm curious for you, because I know you've learned a lot and been through the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur. What are the foundational like mindset habits and principles that you use that keep you steady and keep you consistent and keep you going through the ups and downs? Because entrepreneurship is not this straight line up to the top. It's definitely the ups and downs. And like, if we learn our lessons and if we're humble and patient, eventually we are kind of climbing up. But again, like I said in the beginning, like, you're super intentional in the way you communicate and the way you show up. I'm confident that you have a personal practice or belief or foundational mindsets that you work on to be that way, because entrepreneurship is emotional and hard and crazy. And if we don't have that personal, discipline and structure, then we go off the rails everywhere. But what are your things that you use to help you just show up with that consistency, that kindness, and that continuous mindset of investment, investing in others?
Yeah. It's a great question. You and I have had conversations in the past several times just through comment threads on Facebook. So I am heavily influenced by the Judeo-Christian tradition. I've been a disciple of the Messiah, popularly known as Jesus. I address him by the Hebrew version of his name, Yeshua, for 20 years. And in one sense, that can, I think, if somebody's listening or watching, that can sound very sort of formulaic and all of that. And there is a formulaic, shallow way to interpret it. But as you mentioned at the outset, I cannot read something like the Bible and then turn my brain off and say, oh, okay, I'll just accept it. Everything that it says is absolutely true 100% of the time. And the only thing I must not do is question it or argue with it or try to understand it.
Yeah.
That's that contravenes. It's a complete contradiction, first of all, of what the Bible says.
Yeah.
Right. But secondly, it's a contradiction of my own nature. And I didn't put myself on this planet. I didn't ask to be born or volunteer or say, sign a contract or anything. I was inserted here without my consent. And so I was given the brain that I was given, and I was born into the circumstances that I was and raised the way I was. I believe all of it for a reason. Anyway, I don't want to get way down into like the super deep diving, but I just want to sort of lay a foundation there and say, I study that book, but I don't study it like your average person might do a, perfunctory reading of it or something like that. I mean, I'm analyzing the ancient Hebrew and saying, what does it mean? And if I can't understand it, I'm hanging out with rabbis to find out what it means.
Yeah.
So let me try and answer the question using the verse that basically is the foundational one of my book. Because I read this passage and Yeshua is speaking, Jesus, and he says, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it's gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. And I'm like, Okay, use worldly wealth. So in other words, the first thing he's saying is there is an application, there is a use for having worldly wealth. The sort of conventional unspoken wisdom is that we're supposed to be living below somewhere near the poverty line if we want to
Yeah.
be acceptable Christians, right? But
Hmm.
here is the Messiah himself saying, no, 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 use worldly wealth for yourselves. To gain friends, not for yourselves, to gain friends, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm out doing what I do, what I teach in the book, and what I was doing in the insurance business, and indeed what I do through to this day.
Hmm.
And I'm using resources I have. So sometimes it's worldly wealth. A lot of times it's wealth of relationships, right? I would say that, if you want to join in with that thread you were on and we're talking about the amounts, yeah, I'm not that impressive, right?
Yeah.
But relationally, I'm a billionaire, right?
Hmm.
Relationally, I have introductions to give to people who are billionaires. I'm surprised myself sometimes with who I can introduce.
Yeah.
And then it says to gain friends for yourselves so that when it's gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Now, there's a context and a set of circumstances in which he said that. But basically what he's saying there is, as you go about your daily life, the assets that you have are given to you so that you can give them away. And not so that you go hungry as a result.
Right.
But it's this inversion of what the people on that thread are thinking it's about, right? They're thinking about, oh, I did $50,000 on this deal. What about that? Yeah, well, so did Bernie Madoff, right?
Okay. Yeah. Stephen
There's
asked real quick, what verse is that? I'm curious too. Stephen just asked us.
Luke, the Gospel of Luke, chapter 16, verse 9. I want to say I only know that by heart because I put it in
Yeah.
the book and I had to.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Normally, I'm not good at citing the chapter and the verse. I just remember what the words say.
Yep. No, thank
Um,
you.
but he's basically saying, if you have worldly wealth, right? He realizes not everybody does,
Hmm.
but if you have it, then there's a reason you have it.
Yeah.
And so when I wake up in the morning and when I start doing what I do, if he wanted me to have the kind of financial abundance
Hmm.
that I certainly eventually would like to get, but currently don't have, then he would give it to me. But he hasn't. He's given me a relational wealth,
Yeah.
and he expects me to use it beneficially. And here's the kicker, right? We think, okay, well then what does that mean? Does that mean I got to give, if I got money, I got to give it away to charity? It's way simpler than that.
Yeah.
God is a parent, and I forget how many kids you have, Gabe.
Just my son. He's
Okay,
11. Yep.
you got one. That's right.
Yep.
So I have two boys, so you can imagine the degree of combativeness and testosterone soaked.
Yep. We're just hitting that stage here, so I know what you mean. So,
but you can equally imagine the delight on my face and in my soul when the two cooperate and help each other.
yeah.
God is no different, right? He sees one of his children helping another one of his children, and it puts a smile on his face. He's like, that's my boy, right?
Yeah.
So it's not complicated, but it does require, like I said, an inversion of those priorities and a recognition, a daily reminder, which I find easy to get if you are a person of habits, right?
Hmm.
We'll always say, the morning routine is critical. Well, my morning routine involves sometimes up to 90 minutes of sitting there journaling and sticking my nose between the pages of that Bible.
Yeah.
And I get plenty of reminders. And so it's no longer a mystery to me who I am when I wake up in the morning, or as a byproduct of that, how I should behave. You mentioned intentionally. I show up intentionally because I don't have another way. I've rejected all the other ones and I've chosen this one.
Yeah. I really like that. And I like what you said too about being wealthy in relationships, that you're a billionaire in relationships. A lot of people claim to be great networkers, claim to have a lot of relationships, just like a lot of people claim to have a lot of money, or, claim to have all the flashy things. But it's something that you truly live out. And without giving too much away, because it's not the main point of this, but I just want to highlight that you really are super effective in that, because anybody listening that ever listens to this, that has ever used an Apple product, you introduced me to the voice of Apple.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
And I'll leave it there, because that's is what it is. But that's like, you connect with people. They can tell that you're genuine. You can tell that you really want to help them and serve them, and no strings attached. You said, oh, like, Gabe can help you with with what this individual was working on. And I've realized the same thing. Like, you don't have to have any specific status to be a decent human and try to help others. And when you show up that way, it's super attractive. It's super beneficial to everybody. And it changes things. And the other byproduct of that, at least for me, and I'd be shocked if you don't agree, is like, I don't think there's anything better than giving to other people. I think it's the highlight of my life, is to be able to teach somebody something, to be able to give when I can give financially, to give my time. I don't think there's anything more rewarding than that. Like, and I've had a lot of different experiences in life, good and bad and challenging and, great. And it's like, there's nothing more rewarding than I probably never read that verse that way, or, haven't read it in so long that I forget it. But that was such an awesome reminder of, like, use everything you have for good to help other people. And like, the rest of it will work out fine. And that's something that you really live out. And it's something that I admire about you. And when I look at business, I always remind myself and my team, and when I'm coaching other people, when I do a little bit of business coaching still, and it's like, we're in the business of solving problems. So when there's a problem, that's great news. Like, that's the best thing that can happen to us today, because it means, like, we can show up and serve. We can find a solution. Maybe we have the solution, or maybe I don't have the solution. I'm like, oh, you got to go talk to Paul about that, because I know he'll either have the solution or be able to help you. And when we show up that way, talk about being fulfilled. And I love your question in the beginning. It's awesome. And like, my soul is in a good place, because I made a big intentional shift beginning of this year of, like, I accomplished some personal things that had to happen, and some challenges and some things I was going through. And then I was in this season of, like, man, like, things are pretty stable. Maybe I have amassed some connections and, some millions. I haven't gotten to the billions or anything like that yet, but I've amassed some wealth, and anybody honestly listening to this that has a screen and internet connection is wealthier than a good portion of the world. So you have ability to give back. It doesn't matter what your bank account says. But I just said, I want to shift, and I want to give. I want to help people that really need it with the skills that I have, the ways I can teach. And so by making a small shift, not that I wasn't doing any of that before, but by just kind of realigning my time and my investment and budgeting my time and resources towards it, this has been one of the best years of my life, that I've been the happiest, the most fulfilled, and felt like, oh, like, I'm living in my purpose. And it came from like, part of that is introspection and looking in and understanding who we are. But the real joy and the real wealth comes from just giving to others, and not worrying about what's in it for me. And I feel like I learned that a new way, or at the next level, every few years. And that's such an important lesson. And around that, was there ever a time where you didn't believe that, and you kind of had to come to that realization? Or was there a time where you doubted that, but you decided to push through and still just live out what you knew to be true, and it worked out? Or what have been your doubts around that? Or what have been the challenges around that belief for you, if any?
I think the main problem, I feel like I've had the right attitude for a long period of time. But Gabe, from your business expertise, that you can have the right attitude and still be very poorly positioned. Very sort of awkward communicating what that value is.
Definitely.
And I think I would say that from when I got fired from my last insurance job to the time when people began to pay me for ghostwriting, there was an interim there of really just not struggling to just even make one penny. And I got discouraged numerous times. But by this time, right, I'm nearly 2 decades into my faith. I'm like, I can't. There's no other way that I can do this. It's got to go forward somehow.
Yeah.
And when the fever finally broke and opportunities came up, and I went in 6 weeks. I went from literally making nothing to having a 5-figure business.
Yeah.
I was able to, you get some kind of clarity, and you look back, and the first thing I realized was that I have this gift with the written word, and I'm not offering it to the marketplace.
Yeah.
I'm offering something that I think they want.
Yeah.
Based on what I watch others do that I think I want to do too. When I actually got into the behind the scenes look at what those people that I thought I wanted to be like, what they have to do behind the scenes, I'm like, I don't want any part of this at all.
No kidding.
So it's a world of illusions, right? That's another far-reaching biblical concept that goes back, stretches back through the millennium.
Yeah.
And it's a world of illusions, and maturity does a lot to counteract that. But in order to get to maturity, we have to consent to a process of unbecoming our old selves so that we can become the man we're meant to be, or the woman you're meant to be.
Yeah.
And for me, I would say that there were plenty of moments where I said, well, I'm giving all of this value, but I'm not receiving. Nothing's coming back to me. And if I'd been a little bit smarter, I would have paid attention to how my wife does Christmas shopping.
Yeah.
Because right from the get-go, we've been married 18 years. Right from the get-go, she said, "You're not doing the Christmas shopping."
Good plan, right?
Here is a list of what you're going to go buy, and you're going to go buy it, and then I'm going to act surprised.
Same thing here. It works great. I love it.
So we have the running joke now, right? I put on the label to Shannon from Shannon, right? just to mess with her. Yep. But what she was saying was, I want certain things, and if you offer them to me, I will accept them happily. If you go out and try to make up for me what I want, I'm probably she will send it back.
Yep.
And so it's exactly the same principle, right? You offer people what they actually want in that spirit of giving and generosity, and you'll find plenty of momentum.
Yeah.
Get off that track in either direction, either develop the wrong motives, greed, pride, all those kind of things, or good-hearted person, but you're tone deaf, right? You can't read the tea leaves. You can't see what the problem is. You can't solve it. And then you're not much good to them. You're a nice person, but you're not much good to them.
Yeah. That's really, really wise and a really great example, because there's so many times, looking back now, this is probably why I'm also having my best year ever, because there's so many times in the past where I'd be like, oh, I know better what that person needs, or I know what I should sell them, or I'm clearly the smartest person on the planet, so I'll make up the offer based on what I think they need. And once I finally realized, like, just give people what they want, and everything is so much easier. And it humbled me in a good way. And I was like, and then everything just started working way better. And I've even had seasons where I've drifted off of that unintentionally, and I have to come back and go, oh, what do people actually want? Because it changes. I always use the example, from the marketing perspective, but this is just across the board, the same lesson of, like, I believe it was the 70s, and GM was trying to advertise safety for their vehicles. They're like, oh, this is what people need. It was GM or Ford, I forget, one of the big auto companies. They're like, we're going to be the safest car in the market. We're going to advertise. And they spent, in today's dollars, $1 billion to advertise how safe their cars were, and none of them sold.
Yeah.
And then they were like, oh, people still just want a super fast car. And they switched back and they started making money. And today, if you watch any car commercial, or almost any, it's all about safety. There's safety ratings, because people do want a safe car now. But it's foolish of us to think, oh, I know what the market wants. I'm the expert. I know everything about this, so I'm going to tell people what they should buy from me. And I have this conversation a lot with other entrepreneurs, and I'm like, put aside whatever you think, because you and I are both wrong. I can guarantee you we're both wrong. All we have to do is say, what does the market want? Well, let's just give them what they want. And sometimes I also think the cases where we need to meet people with their wants. And then when we have the relationship and when we've served them with the initial want, then we can deliver them what they need. Cause sometimes they're different, but there's there's like, it's never going to be a smooth process and virtually never successful. We just say, you need this. And so get this. Like nobody wants to be told what to do. Number one. And you don't actually know somebody else's needs, and especially not their wants as well as they do. And so, yeah, I think that's incredibly wise. And what a great analogy and example of, because I do the same thing. Rachel will be like, here's what I want for Christmas. And like, I get a list, or like I get a few things, a few months before Christmas. And I'm like, awesome. I know exactly what to get, and she'll love it. And it's not that I can't be creative at all or offer other things, but she gives me the whole framework of here's the things I want. Here's what I need. And then it's great. And I think that not doing that comes from ignorance and pride, or some combination of that. Because if I think I know better than you what you want and what you need, the odds of it working out long term are just, it's not there. So I think that's incredibly wise, and what a great example.
Well, particularly if people are busy telling you what they want and what they need.
True.
That's the worst part. You could excuse prior generations because you had to go through focus groups and do all that kind of stuff, and it was time consuming work.
Yeah.
But I'm working my way through trying to get more sophisticated on my position. Literally was doing it this morning. And the question was, what do your clients actually value from from working with you?
Yeah.
And I realized I don't have to call them up or ask them to get on calls, because they've already recorded testimonials. I just need to go back and watch the testimonials. They're on my YouTube channel.
No kidding.
So, and the funny thing is, you would think that this occurs to a guy like me naturally. Why? Because I'm busy putting together webinars with my new business partner, where we're talking about many things, but one of them is the process of writing a book. And we're encouraging people, in fact, telling them, before you even make a single keystroke on that book, you need to do some research so that you understand who you're writing to, what are their pain points and arguments and hesitations and frustrations and all that kind of thing, so that somewhere in that copy, you have what my partner Jason calls a hell yeah moment.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I've had a hell yeah moment before. I have occasionally been on the receiving end of a really good marketing message that literally touched me right where I was in the moment.
Yeah.
So that it was painfully obvious what the solution was. And I never hesitated about buying. And I started with a $47 product and ended up paying $1,500 a month at one point.
Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, I go down the rabbit hole there. I know you got other questions, but particularly when people are telling you what they're after, and you have a sincere heart, you have 2/3 of the equation. Now the third part is, can you actually solve their problem or help them?
Right.
And you can always lean on what we talked about, which is that if you can't solve the problem, but you're a relational billionaire, then in a way you sort of can. It's just not you who does it.
Right.
So.
And I will always remember that you connected me with that person. Like, I'll always remember that. And I always remember the people that connect me. So you're not only providing value, but you're inserting like a permanent marker in people's minds and lives of like, oh, this is somebody that provided a ton of value to me. And it's just natural and normal that I want to reciprocate that and help you. Like, it's a normal process. And I love what you just pointed out, because I have 3 books on Amazon, 2 which are not worth reading. And I wrote them.
You too, huh?
Yeah. And probably and plenty of half-started books that nobody should ever even open or consider reading. But when I wrote Atomic Words, it actually was from a place of like, man, I keep having these conversations with other entrepreneurs where they're struggling to communicate. I keep having these conversations where people aren't getting their heart and their message across. And so I actually wrote it to help people solve the problems that I had heard about. And so the book was much more successful than, the others that sold 5 copies, or I don't know if they even sold 5. And a friend of mine, Andrew Kapp, he wrote a book recently called How to Sell 100,000 Copies of Your Book, or I think that's the title. he always has really nice but really long titles, so I don't always get them straight.
Yep.
And he's in the secret of the book, which he builds up to in a great way, is serve the reader. Wow, magical. And I think he's probably approaching 250,000 books sold for one of his books, because he said every day I woke up and said, how do I serve the reader when I was writing it? And then after he published it, he said, how do I serve the reader every day for everybody that read it? And like, imagine that concept. just help people.
And he knows how to do that. A shout out to the cap. He and I have been friends for a while too. And not surprising, you and I tend to traffic among the same people. So yeah.
Brilliant.
Good man.
Yep. And his other book, since we're talking about his books, is called The Last Law of Attraction Book You'll Ever Need to Read, which is one of my all-time favorite books that I recommend to everybody. And so what I love about what I know about what you do in your business, Paul, and we've talked about this a little bit because I think we're more on the kind of friendship relationship side than the business side so far. Even though we've done a little bit of business and talked some things there, I'm excited to learn about your process of how you help people write books, because I know for me, there's so much value in a book. One is it really does help you stand out above the crowd, because you have the opportunity to serve so many more people. And even if I think my book's like 160 pages or something, it's not incredibly long for a book, but that takes a ton of effort. I mean, it takes a ton of work, especially if you're writing yourself. And if you have never written a book, then even if you have value to provide and you can serve people with your information, the technicality of writing a book, figuring out how to get it published, knowing how to write, there's a huge difference between speaking and writing. Even though it's good to write in the same tone and style that you speak, it's completely different, because I talk on and run on sentences probably, but you can't really write that way. And so the value that somebody gets from a book, because they can serve more people, and how it really does elevate and position them, it's such a huge asset, even in today's world where, all things digital and, all of that, there's so many different channels. But even in just publishing a book that I'm actually proud of this time, and I really designed to serve and help people, it's so rewarding to get an email back and say, man, I read your book and like, it was super helpful to me. And it's so rewarding to be able to just ship a book off as a gift to somebody, because I know it'll help them. Or even just as a thank you. And so tell me about your business and what you guys are doing now, and how you help people really take that next big step in serving others and serving their network and their audience and the people that they want to impact.
Yeah, I like the way you framed that, Gabe, because a book is I'm just testing this. I'm just like first time market testing this language on somebody who is a great friend, also happens to be a target client, for it is a token of the depth that you bring to the subject you write about. That's a phrase that just popped into my mind as I listened to you talk about it. It's a tangible demonstration of the length you're willing to go. To understand, communicate, teach, disseminate important information. And that, of course, like anything, so is Mein Kampf, right? Anything can be used for good or evil, right? But my point is, in this context, right? It shows, and that's why, like, you'll get people who, I've had people say, you wrote a book? Yes, I did. Can I have a copy? Absolutely. Then they never read it.
Yeah.
Right.
Plenty of that happens too, unfortunately. But
it's ironic, but it doesn't diminish the altered perception that it creates of the author to the reader.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is there's a degree of authority and credibility that come with doing this. Now, you talk about you're curious about the process. The process, I think, that really appeals to our clients from the research I was just doing this morning on those YouTube videos, over and over again, is summed up. I actually wrote down these words that resonate, and if these resonate with you, then that means you're jiving with it, right? So, emissary, steward, listener, interpreter, amplifier. Now, there's other ways to skin this cat. If you're working with us, we are a faithful emissary. So this whatever you end up publishing, it looks like, it sounds like, it reads like you wrote it.
Yeah.
We don't want credit. We don't want the with credit.
Right.
I'm not disparaging that. I'm just saying we
Right.
don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
We want our clients to appear consistent with, because that's their message, right? So that
Yeah.
it's not like we're making it up, or
Mm-hmm.
we have influence on it, no doubt, but we don't make it
Right.
up. We're stewards of it. We're extremely conscientious and attentive to details. Our editing process is multi-layered. Our deadlines, we never miss them. It's like we say, you will be ready to go into publishing in 90 to 120 days.
Yeah.
And
Just fast.
if we include the publishing, it's more like 4 to 6 months total. But
Right.
the listener part of it, right? You have to be able to sit there like a Zen monk and sit absolutely silent and let somebody's stream of consciousness come out, even if it's rambling, even if it's incoherent. You can
Yeah.
always go back and listen to the recording
Yep.
as you write, but you
Yeah.
can't be interrupting. You can't be domineering. You got to let that person talk, and you got to know questions that get them talking.
Yeah. That's the secret for sure.
Interpretation, right? That's another thing, is like many authors are self-aware enough to know that I understand what I'm talking about, but will the reader understand it?
Yeah.
And we question that all along, right? I've had a couple authors say, thank you so much for forcing me to explain myself in a way that my reader will not get confused or bored, or think they're listening to a highbrow academic lecture, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And this is my favorite part, the amplification. So, some of our clients have said to me, I like to think through when I'm going to write out loud, and when I send it to you, it's like a game of volley. It's like a volley in tennis, right?
Yeah.
You hit it back, but you don't just hit back what I said. You hit back what I said, spun up with your perspective on it.
Yeah.
So that all of a sudden it expands the universe of my thinking. And so that's why I say we're influential on the message. Some of what actually gets in there is stuff that we come up with, but we're coming up with it to support or to enhance what the author's saying. So, that's my favorite part, is just the back and forth, the dialogue that creates this synergy, this clash. Not clash is not the right word, but this merging of spiritual forces that are better together than they are in silos. So, I mean, I don't know if that does the best job of explaining it. There's more technical, more nuts and bolts stuff we could add to it, but that's how I would summarize it.
I love it. I think that's great. And that's a pretty fast timeline, and to have the confidence and the integrity, like you said, of like, we don't miss our deadlines. We're able to stay on schedule. That is unique in the book space on all fronts. So that's really admirable and awesome. And so 4 to 6 months, if they do the whole publishing process with you, that's obviously the timeline and work and back and forth. I'm curious what the hours investment from a client is with you, because I know from writing the book myself and going through a series of wonderful lessons and maybe unfortunate events, but it all ended up good in the end. I decided to go the traditional publishing route and learned a ton, and won't do that again. And ended up self-publishing at the end again, which was a story for a different day. But regardless of what path I would have taken, it was super time consuming. And I have a team that helps me. And like, I wrote it alone, and then I have an editors and like all that, but it's time consuming. So the other thing we've touched on in some of our quick conversations that we've had, over time here, is that it seems like it's pretty time efficient as far as hours that I have to put in as a client if I work with you. So I'm curious, just touch on that for a minute.
Oh yeah. We just started a new project with a client, and so we'll be done with that early February at the latest. And he's committed to an hour a week of being on Zoom. Nice. It just doesn't take us that long, right? We come to it prepared. Because my team doesn't just do the writing, they do a bunch of research of our own. Mm-hmm. So we know, we have some idea, combining what the client tells us with what the market says out in places like Answer the Public and all that. We do that research and we say, okay, what do people want to know? Because then if we know what they want to know, we can frame the questions in the interviewing easily. Yeah. This is what the people want to know. So what's your answer to this? What's your story about this? The other thing we do that I think is helpful is, you know, John Maxwell had this quote. He said, "Never make a point without telling a story, and never tell a story without making a point."
Yeah.
And so, our philosophy has always been to treat it like you would a before and after photo. There was this, then this happened, and now it's like this, right?
Yeah.
There was dysfunctional, not working, ineffective, failure, struggle, pain, sorrow, blah 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 blah. That's how it was before.
Yeah.
Then I learned this key principle in the middle. I adapted to it, I accepted it, I made myself one with it, and now look at me, right? Now
Yeah.
I'm the expert. Now I can point you to all kinds of cases where we get this right.
Mm-hmm.
And inside baseball lingo, that's called the open loop. But basically, it's like a print before and after.
Mm-hmm.
And when you tell stories like that, you can still teach people, here's what you should do. But by that time, they're so engulfed in the drama of your story, going from a negative to a positive, that they're going to absorb it naturally, and they're not going to clash with it.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's maybe a little bit more. Bottom line is, yeah, we can do stuff like that in an hour a week for the first couple of weeks, and then we get stuck in the writing, and from then on it's check-ins. So again, but it's still just once a week, right? We're still just going over each piece. We're going over it meticulously. We ourselves are editing it. It's in Google Docs. You can make edits during the week. You can set aside time when you have time to work on it. But we don't need more than about an hour a week throughout that process.
So it sounds like an hour a week for like 12 to 16 weeks at the longest, maybe. Is that accurate?
Yep.
Nice. Yeah, that's way faster than doing it on your own. I can tell you that, as I'm sure you know, because you wrote your own book too. Yeah, it's so amazing when we bring in the right support and experts in their space, how much more we can amplify our message, how much more we can serve others, and having that in process being intensive in the results and the output that comes out of it, but not intense or challenging in the step-by-step, means that you're serving, these authors are serving their readers in such a better way. Because even as I look at, we all go back and look at our work and go, oh, I could have changed this or done better. In the middle of this process, you are challenging and supporting and helping and refining and developing the ideas more. And that is, just getting your thoughts out is a ton of work. And then going back and making it more powerful, that's truly what powerful editing is about. And so sounds like an amazing process. And I can tell that you're super intentional, as you are in all areas of your life, and how you show up and serve these authors.
And it's iterative too. One thing I wanted to add to that is it's you go back over it, and sometimes, right, what I've encouraged clients to say is, remember that the Bible is not comprehensive.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the point.
There's plenty of stuff the Bible has nothing to say about it.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that there's nothing whatsoever to say about it. That just means it doesn't say it in the Bible. And it's the glory of man to search out what that, to what that is. So that's why we have the commentary and the sages and all that throughout the centuries. But I say what I try to get across to clients there is, we have a deadline past which I can't go without, I need more money, which I don't want to talk about that. I mean, I want you done on time.
Yeah.
Be comfortable with a great job that years later you look back on it and say, I could have done this differently. And that's okay.
Right.
We're always living, breathing stories, growing, changing. None of us are going to be exactly the same 5 years from now as we are today. So, there is a point where you have to be comfortable with saying it's good enough.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Well, I really appreciate the time and the wisdom today, Paul. We'll definitely have you back on in 6 months to a year and see what else you've been up to and all the great things you're working on. Where would you like people to connect with you? How can they learn more about what you're up to and follow you and obviously work with you if they're ready to write a book?
Yeah, thanks for that. Quickest beeline to me is on LinkedIn or Facebook. I go by the handle Meet Paul Edwards, MEET. Cool. And coincidentally, I managed to actually put up a landing page. Can you believe it, Gabe? I actually put up a landing page
I know how that
on
goes. When we're working our own
meetpauledwards.com.
business. Meetpauledwards.com. Awesome.
And there, anybody who subscribes, and I'm not a frequent emailer, so don't worry about that. But anybody who subscribes, if they want, there's a free digital copy of my book, Influencer Networking Secrets, that you can download
Awesome.
when you subscribe. So if you want to do that, by all means, knock yourself out.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Paul. I love hanging out with you and spending time together. Appreciate all the wisdom and everything you shared today. Everyone can go to meetpauledwards.com. I definitely highly recommend you do that, no matter what you choose to do, or if you have a book in you. You do have a book in you. I know that. But if you're ready to produce that book or not, I would encourage you to connect with Paul, because I know he'll add a ton of value to your life. So thank you for being here today, Paul, and we will talk to you again soon.
Thanks for having me, my friend. Great to be here.